I have a friend who has a significant hearing loss. And if you spend time with her, you need to concentrate on being on the side with the good ear, which sometimes when I haven't seen her for a while, I forget. And we'll be walking along and I'll be talking away. She'll say, like, come over here. I have always thought that there was something really basically ironic about the fact, though, that she pays attention. She really hears what you say as long as you're on the good side. It's ironic that the best listener I know is someone who's hearing impaired. I think it's also kind of ironic that the person in this story who sees most clearly is a man who was born blind. He's not the one who has trouble seeing in this story in the sense of really understanding what it is that he's witnessed. He's probably still learning to use his new eyes, and yet as the story goes along, he sees more and more clearly, while everyone else seems to be losing their sense of vision. There are themes of seeing and knowing that run all the way through the readings today, starting with the reading from Samuel, in which we see that the way God sees into our hearts is not always the way that we see each other. In the gospel, we see that sometimes it's the simplest person who is the first to understand the deep truths of our lives. The man born blind in this whole story really is the only one who sees Jesus as he is. The blind man doesn't ask to be cured. The disciples are talking about him in the beginning of the story, and Jesus stops and comes over and goes through this process of making mud and putting it on his eyes. The blind man follows everything Jesus says, and when Jesus says go and wash, he does. When he comes back able to see, Jesus is gone, so he still hasn't seen Jesus. The odd thing is when he comes back as a sighted man, some of his neighbors don't even recognize him. To them, he's a beggar, a blind beggar, and when they see him as a sighted man, they're like, oh, it's just someone who looks like him. It's not him. And he keeps saying, I am the man. His answers to the religious leaders consistently are just the simple truth of what happened. He made mud, put it on my eyes, told me to go wash. I went and washed and received my sight. I don't know if he's a sinner. I just know that I was blind, and now I see. It's as if he were saying, if I were writing the message, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. But as he goes along, his faith in Jesus grows. So in the beginning, he refers to him as the man called Jesus. The next thing he says is, he is a prophet. After that, he's saying he must be from God, or he couldn't do something like this. And finally, at the end of the story, he says, Lord, I believe, and he falls down and worships him. This growth in faith, I think, as you go through the story, maybe even more than the physical cure, I think this is how God's works are revealed in this man. And his reward for speaking this truth is that he's driven out of the synagogue and banished, which is, he couldn't just go down the street to the Lutheran church, he was out. Which is really precisely the thing that his parents were afraid of that made them so reticent to speak. Jesus hears about this, hears that he's been thrown out, comes and finds him, and this is the first time that he actually sees Jesus. And he needs the voice to recognize him. So this whole time, while the blind man's vision is improving, the religious leaders in this story are losing theirs. They don't even believe that he was really blind until his parents come and they're grilled about this. And I wonder, how often do we fail to see God at work in our own lives? Not just in major miracles, but in all of the everyday wonders and what we sometimes call coincidences of our lives. How does God provide for you? Where can you see evidence of God's presence in your life? The people in this story don't see it, and there's really not much to admire in most of these characters. The neighbors look at this man and see only his disability. The religious leaders are the real villains in the story. There's There's a warning. And the parents let their son down. They more or less abandon him. For me, I think the most touching moment in this story is when Jesus comes back. He hears that the man has been grilled by the religious leaders and driven out of the synagogue. And he's not saying like, okay, well, I fixed you. You're on your own now. I got some salvation to worry about. He comes back and finds him and pays attention to him, much like my friend. This is my Jesus. This is the Jesus I love. I love the guy who comes back looking for you when you're down and out. His love is certainly not without cost. We're in the middle of a season of remembering that some people were so threatened by this kind of love that they had him put to death. So this love is not without cost, either to Jesus or to us. But I love the Jesus who comes back to give new life, who turns a woman living on the margins of society into an evangelist, who stops to give sight to a blind man and then seeks him out again when he hears that people have been giving him a hard time because of it, who cries at the death of his friend Lazarus, as we'll hear next week, and then calls him back out of his tomb. I love this Jesus, and I know that he loves me. When I first looked at these readings on Monday, I had a moment of wondering why Psalm 23 was our psalm choice for today. It's not Good Shepherd Sunday or not any other really obvious reason why it's in there. It doesn't always connect to the other readings, but often it does. And I realize that it's probably there in honor of King David, the little shepherd boy who was anointed by Samuel and became a great king and composer of psalms, traditionally including this one. But I also realized that if I kept reading this gospel, which you're probably glad I didn't, but if I went on, the very next thing we would have heard was Jesus saying, I am the good shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Amen.